Well, that's one of those questions about what's the definition of a documentary film, is that even documentary filmmakers want to argue about from time to time. Mm-hmm. The terminology is sometimes hard to even agree on, because for a long time these films were called things like non-fiction, which meant that it was the thing that was defined in opposition to something else. Up until the mid-1920s or so, the form was usually referred to as something like actuality film. And it's the Scottish-born filmmaker and critic John Grierson who coined the term documentary for English language usage in 1926, and that's become the accepted term. Some critics have said that a documentary is one in which the filmmakers have voluntarily given up control over much of what they're filming. Whereas in the case of a fiction film, it's all about complete control as much as possible with a script, with rehearsed actors, with sets, costumes, props, etc. The documentary filmmakers are voluntarily willing to open it up to the world, to the flow of reality.
Nanook of the North is considered by many to be the first true documentary film. Created by Robert Flaherty in 1922, the documentary depicts the life of an Inuit family over the course of 1 year. The idea of capturing real events on film and presenting them with relatively little input from the director was truly revolutionary. The success of Nanook in the box office proved to the industry that documentaries could compete with traditional films in terms of viewership and reach.
This is the perpetual question about documentaries for anybody who wants to make them, and it all very much depends on what the goal of the film is, what the film is going to be used for in some way or another. So when people are making strongly advocacy-oriented films, they're for this position or this issue or something, then they don't feel the need to be objective or nonpartisan in some way, and that's fine as long as that's clear. Other documentarians want to open up themselves to follow what they observe in the film.
Adolf Hitler, der Führer der deutschen Jugend, hat das Wort.
In certain cases, documentaries have had too much bias imparted on them by the filmmaker, as is the case in Triumph of the Will. This infamous account of the 1934 Nuremberg Nazi Party rally can only be described as propaganda due to its highly partisan portrayal of the Nazi Party. Films that suffer from representations that are too subjective still hold the power to impact the views of the people. The increased credibility of the medium gives more power to the filmmaker in changing the views of the public, for better or for worse.
Und wir möchten nun, dass ihr, deutsche Jungens und deutsche Mädchen, in euch all das aufnehmt, was wir dereinst uns von Deutschland erhoffen.
But the filmmaker is always part of the equation, because ultimately, no matter how objective that one attempts to be, the filmmaker is always going to control the selection of material. So, for example, you're talking to me and not any number of other people you could have talked to. If you go out to a certain location to cover, stories about, say, this campus, if you go here and not there, you're making decisions about what the film's going to be. And then you have further choices to be made about, are we going to do like this, or are we going to do a sit-down interview and you're going to ask me formal questions, or are you going to be observing something that's in process that I don't have any control over or other people don't have any control over?
Is it important or fun? Yes.
Tony was brought up in the East End of London.
I'm a bit jockey when I grow up. Yeah, I want to be a jockey when I grow up.
The Up series is a group of documentaries that started with the film 7 Up. With its first film, the series established the premise of following British children from various social classes through their lives. Starting in 1964, when the participants were 7 years old, the latest release by the series in 2012 shows the same participants at age 56. Though the series is very ambitious in its scope, it proves that the potential for documentary films is vast.
At the time to become a jockey, but now, well, I wasn't good enough. My greatest fulfilment in life when I rode at Kempton in the same race as Lester Piggott.
It's a question of what seems to work for the particular context or purpose of the film. John Grierson again believed, and many documentarians have followed suit with him, that regardless of what you're going to do, the film has to be interesting as a film. Grierson and his colleagues were really committed to the idea that a film had to be visually interesting. It had to be technically polished and sophisticated, because essentially what that documentary film was going to be competing with was Hollywood-style entertainment movies.
The impact of certain documentaries is indisputable, and belonging to this class of film is The Thin Blue Line. By re-evaluating the facts involved in a decided murder case, this film successfully overturned the previous ruling of the court. The film played to the genre's strength of providing an unbiased account of an event, and thus had the credibility to enact a change. Proving that the masterful usage of the documentary film medium can have an immediate impact on society, The Thin Blue Line is a great example of what the genre can do.
Took me upstairs, what floor, I don't know, but they put me in a little room. Gus Rose walked in. He had a confession there he wanted me to sign. He said that I would sign it. He didn't give a damn what I said. I would sign this piece of paper he's got. I told him I couldn't.
There's just so much variety to the potential ways to approach documentary that you see today, that it's really very interesting. And that being the case, I don't think there's one approach that's necessarily better than the other. What's really interesting is what they do with it in any particular film. And just in the same analogy with fiction films, there's all sorts of ways to approach a particular subject in a fiction film, and there's a similar kind of range of possibilities that are there for documentary film as well.
Absolutely outrageous. Okay, for the first time we're seeing uric acid elevated, so you're giving yourself hyperuricemia, and the danger of hyperuricemia is gout, kidney stones. The results for your liver are obscene beyond anything I would have thought. Yeah.
The film Super Size Me has become a ubiquitous model of the contemporary documentary. The idea to eat only McDonald's food for 30 days may not seem profound, but the director's ability in transforming the idea was enough to disrupt the targeted fast food industry. As shown by such documentaries, the topic of the film is not the only factor in determining the film's success. The ability of the documentarian to portray his vision is what sets apart great documentaries from the good ones.
Pounds of sugar from their food. That's a pound a day. On top of that, I also took in 12 pounds of fat. In only 30 days of eating nothing but McDonald's, I gained 24.5 pounds. My liver turned to fat, and my cholesterol shot up 65 points. My body fat percentage went from 11 to 8.
There's all sorts of ways and situations with different means of production. How did they do this, and why did they do it? And to just find out the range again of what is possible and how you can approach something. And sometimes what's interesting about films is you take subjects that aren't necessarily intrinsically interesting, like a big social issue, and you make it interesting in certain ways if you can find an approach to it.